I didn't particularly like this quote from Nick Caserio. Nick Caserio was quoted as to saying, I read this quote, we know how important it is to get results now, and we have a lot of work to do. I'm excited to partner with Demeco to build our football team together. Mm-hmm. The part that I don't love about that is get results now, because I think there's a lot of things that you can do where you try to win football games in 2023 that prevents you from winning games in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. I still believe the Houston Texans need to have a long-term approach. And I'm not saying, to embrace the suck. I'm not saying to tank. I'm not saying to win 2 football games next year. But there are certain things that you can do next season that prevents the growth of this organization. And look, I know Nick Caserio, he might not feel like the reset button has been pushed. I believe that he should feel that way. And I think that Cal McNair needs to reassure him that the reset button has been pushed on his tenure with the Houston Texans now that Demeco Ryans is here. Because they're giving Demeco Ryans a runway. They're giving him 6 seasons. Nick Caserio needs that same runway to partner up with Demeco Ryans. Because if Nick Caserio is truly on the hot seat and his job's on the line and he feels pressure to win next year, then he's going to use up all $40 million of cap space signing stopgap free agents, including Jimmy Garoppolo, and the Texans might go win 7 games next year, and then in 2 years they suck again.
This is Bears 2.0 with Nagy and Pace, where they don't care about the resource given up. They're trying to save their asses to do things that completely blow up the rebuild. I think the thing that struck me about the Caserio quote that I had to read as well until we see tomorrow and hear more was he opened it up by saying, speaking for the entire Houston Texans organization. I was like, okay, I mean, I don't think Cal had a quote previous to that. You don't have to speak for and plus, I don't know if that was the power play of saying I'm still in charge. But
I don't think so.
I think he should just be speaking for himself and saying how ecstatic he is that the organization has a guy in place that can do the things they want him to do and all the other things. I understand and agree with what you said as well, but I was like, you don't need to be speaking for anybody but yourself right now, because of all the people that are on solid footing, you ain't one of them.
Sure. But that's to Joe's point, I agree that the goals need to be put in place. And look, Caserio's quote that I kind of dove in on is the one where he says that we need to get results now. Yeah. The results really shouldn't be the wins. The results should be the evaluation of your draft picks, to Joe's point. Do we see progression from Derek Stingley? Okay, that's a win for Nick Caserio. Do we see Jalen Petrie look much better in year 2 than year 1? And he looked good his rookie year. Okay, that's a win for Nick Caserio. Same thing with Kenyon Green. Same thing with Dameon Pierce. Same thing for this rookie class, stacking them up to other rookies that will be drafted in the 2023 NFL draft. That's how Nick Caserio should be evaluated by Cal McNair and the decision makers above Nick Caserio. Nick Caserio should not feel the pressure that they need to win 7 games next year because they need to get results now. Because winning 7 games next year is feasible. You can do that. But winning 7 games next year, I think, hamstrings you going forward. Because it's very, it's very easy to win 7 games next year with $40 million in cap space and the number 2 and number 12 pick in the NFL draft. You could, trade those, totally extreme look here and totally kind of an outlandish idea. Not that I'm suggesting it. You just trade the 2 and 12 picks for really good players right now. And then you use the $40 million to sign average players across the board. You're going to win 7 games, and then you have nothing going forward. That cannot be the results that you need right this second.
No, they can't, because for every Joe Burrow pick, you're hoping that next year there's the Jamar Chase. There's a way to continue to make this team better. Even if he goes defense, if you go with an interior defensive lineman this year, if you go with someone that's in the linebacking core next year, or another stud influential player, or however you, again, we go back to however you get your franchise quarterback, you can do so many more things, and you don't want to stunt the growth at this point of what so far, with the exception of one loss on the very last game of the season last year, kind of pressed a slight pause button in the embrace the suck mentality. You're still going to come out okay. You're going to have a little bit, one obstacle is going to cost you a little bit possibly, but you're still not too far gone from staying right on schedule. The one thing that could screw up your schedule is if your motives change, if the direction changes, if you do some of the things you were talking about, now you got real problems. And now you're thinking more from yourself, in a selfish perspective, you're thinking more about yourself than you are the organization, because you're close. You're getting there. You're following the path and the plan, and things are starting to fall into place. You don't need a guy going rogue now to try and win in the short term, which screws up everything you've been trying to do long term.
Yeah, the path needs to be the same for Demeco and Caserio, and I'm not expecting Demeco Ryans to win 7 games in year 1. Like, win 5 and have really good young players that look very promising. That it looks like you have the building of a really good future. 2616. If Demeco fails, what has to happen? 713-780-3776. 2616. 2616. If Demeco fails, it'll be because of ownership and upper management in the organization. That's a valid concern. No one has tons of faith in Cool Cat Cal McNair. We hope, and the Demeco Ryans signing, I think, kind of alleviates some of that fear. The hope is that they're turning the corner on what has been dysfunction the last few years.
And the hope is Hannah becomes more involved on a daily basis. Hannah seems to have a very level head on her shoulders. She seems to understand and have a firm hand on the pulse of not only the public, but the perception and the reality of what they need to do. And I think that you're getting some people in the room now that can have true discussions about what's in the best interest of the franchise instead of Tommy Boy interrupting video games to try and figure out what he doesn't know. And I think that's encouraging all in itself. So now it's going to be, we don't have to ask the question, did Cal even know when Bill O'Brien traded D-Hop? Now we assume that you have really smart people in a room that are capable of making the appropriate decisions for a franchise trying to turn the corner.
Lim on Twitch is saying that Demeco fails because Caserio has gotten in the way. I think to me that's the all-encompassing thing is Nick Caserio derails the talent of this team, the roster building, the team building of this team. And I believe that Caserio should be given the allowance to have a decent amount of patience, a decent amount of runway. If you're committing 6 years to Demeco Ryans, you're not expecting him to turn around this organization in a year.
Right.
It needs to be, look, best case scenario, 2024, it's a team that can be competitive in a bad division. But it has the young players, the young pillars, the young foundation of being like a contender for the next 3, 5, 7 years after that. But that takes patience. And it takes hitting on draft picks.
Yeah, you have to hit on the draft picks first and foremost. You do have the money to play with, but the most impactful players this franchise, I think, is going to get in the short term is going to come out of the draft. So you've got to get those picks right. And ideally, you'd like to get a situation where at different skill position groups, you add significant franchise-changing players in the next couple of years because you've got, like you said, multiple picks if you need to use them to move up. But more so, if you just keep doing your business the way you've been doing it, you should get a top 5 pick next year too. And whether it's Marvin Harrison Jr. or this is when you truly attack the quarterback or however you go about it, as long as you're strategic and you're great at talent evaluation or just good enough, you shouldn't be able to swing and completely miss where you're picking, and you should make your franchise better.
The other part of that too, though, is that they're players that will fit Demeco. Because, look, Derek Stingley Jr., maybe he is Sauce Gardner, but whenever he's sitting back in a cover two, he looks like a 4th-round rookie. So, like, it's great to be able to evaluate what's going to be a good football player and what's not going to be a good football player. But last year, the 49ers had a safety they drafted in the 5th round that was an all-pro in his rookie year because it was a type of player that really fits Demeco Ryans' defense. And Nick Caserio and Demeco, I think, come from 2 different football philosophies. So the big, like, make or break for me when it comes to Nick Caserio is being able to evaluate which players will be good for Demeco. Like, no square peg and round hole type of thing. Like, you have to be able as a general manager to identify, okay, this is my head coach. These are things that he's
Demeco,
looking for. 4-3, 4-2-5 nickel defense. What's our offensive coordinator going to look like? And what players do they value? And how can we find those players to fit us? Can you find it? Like Dameon Pierce was very good. Dameon Pierce was very good last year for the Houston Texans. Like, can you find a running back in the 4th or 5th? Like, San Francisco is known for finding these dudes 5th, 6th round that could run for 1,000 yards. Nick Caserio has to be able to find those players to fit the offense that they want to be able to run.
I expand that thought process to say not just for Demeco, but Demeco's staff, right? Because that's why I'm going to translate it to the other side of the football. I'm going to say whoever he picks as offensive coordinator and his staff, I'm going to know that they're going to run a system to where I'm going to get players that are going to allow you to perfectly fit and run that system on a play-by-play basis. I know, like you said, John Lynch and whoever else was involved with John Lynch drafting the guys that they drafted, they have hit on a ton of picks, especially in the middle rounds, that have become significant pieces as role players to their ultimate puzzle. That's what you got to have with Nick Caserio. Nick Caserio should now be able to finally, once and for all, wipe his hands clean of having to deal with, on a week-to-week basis, the missteps of coaches. Now he needs to worry about being able to fortify the cabinet and putting enough groceries on the table so that Demeco and his staff can put up the best meal possible, can serve the best dinner.
He should be able to do that.
Like the fourth round talent, though, is a fourth round talent, right? Like, I'm not telling Nick Caserio to find second round players in the fourth round. But whenever you find a fourth round player and it's a fourth round talent that just fits Demeco's defense or whoever his offensive coordinator is to a T, that's whenever a fourth round player looks like a second rounder. The safety for San Francisco, fifth round draft pick. There's no reason that dude should be an all-pro as a rookie. Why does he? Because he's the perfect fit for Demeco, and Demeco can bring out the skills in that specific player that are catered to his defense. And that's what's going to be a struggle for Nick Caserio, is learning the tendencies and the desires and the wants of Demeco Ryans to build the 53.
But he was a scout and a coach, and he should know how to be able to fill.
He did for a long time with one master.
Yeah, he did with Belichick.
With one master.
He watched Belichick do it, so in theory, he should have the tools.
He didn't with Lovey.
But see, I get your point, but I think it proves how much Lovie Smith was not his hire, because the second he took Derek Stingley Jr., I told everyone that he does not belong in Lovie Smith's defense.
We talked about that.
It will be a disaster.
Completely agree. And I think that's why they viewed Lovey as a stopgap, not as long term. Because that was the biggest tell to me, that they didn't think Lovey was going to be here for more than 2 to 3 years. If Nick Caserio is drafting a corner at number 3, when Lovie Smith goes on Barstool and tells them that cornerback is his 5th, not 1st, not 2nd, not 3rd, not 5th most important defensive position, they aren't aligned. But Nick Caserio, and I don't put much stock in Lovey and Nick because he didn't think that Lovey was going to be here long term, but Nick cannot be stubborn. Nick can't be like, I think that defensive end's the most important whenever you have Demeco Ryans saying interior defensive line is the most important. So Caserio has to be adaptable and be able to work with Demeco.
Yeah, Nick's days of running roughshod and doing whatever Nick desires as the godfather of the Houston Texans are over. But he has, in order to make sure he sees the majority of his contract through now, he's got to be a team player. He's got to be a team player that is trying to do the best things for this franchise short and long term, and his head coach and his coaching staff, and to some degree his ownership, as opposed to all the things that he was getting away with before you had all these other checkpoints and people in place that could make sure that we were staying on track. Because now you're on watch. Now you're in the crosshairs, because we already know people were calling for his job last year, and as it relates to at the end of this season. So now we know that we said, look, if we're still having these conversations a year from now, then we need to evaluate if Nick should be gone. And so he's got to be on his P's and Q's, and he's got to do what he needs to do to make sure he gives Demeco Ryans and this organization every chance to succeed.